Hey, you guys! Thanks for joining me on another journey. Today we got a different episode. We're here at a whiskey tour. So if you don't like whiskey, turn the video off now. But it's gonna be fun. We're at Stranahan's Whiskey in Colorado. And this is Cole, buddy of mine.
How's it going?
My evil instigator, drinking whiskey. This is part 2 of Stranahan's Whiskey Tour. So if you haven't seen the first one, go back to my channel at Go Travel on the Cheap and watch part 1 first. So that's at least 75% alcohol. That's good. We don't need to do this again. We're happy with that. In fact, we need to bring that proof down a bit before we barrel it. So what we do is we cut it down with carbon filtered water that we get from Boulder, Colorado. Break it down to 110. That's called casking or barreling proof. And then after we age and harvest those barrels, we cut it down with that same water, come down to our final product at 94. And a quick note on that water, guys. It's El Dorado spring water. If you live in Colorado, you've seen it before. If you're visiting, you'll probably spot it around. But yeah, every year in West Virginia, they have a super unsexy water tasting competition. Every year since 2006, El Dorado has placed gold or silver. I looked it up myself about a year ago, and as of then, they had it ranked the second best tasting water in the world, actually. Which is pretty cool. It's in our backyard, and we put it in our whiskey, so that's neat. Nice. All right, guys, how are we doing? You still with me?
Yeah.
All right. Where we talked about grain and location, right? So the grain is corn. Bourbon has to be a majority corn, at least 51%. So we do not have that in common with bourbon since we just use barley. You know, it's a traditional American crop. People started to distill from their corn crops in order to maximize their profits. That's also why bourbons tend to be a bit sweeter on that whiskey spectrum. The last thing is where it's distilled. Pretty much every tour I've ever given, someone says it has to come from Kentucky or Bourbon County. Well guys, this is lies and propaganda by people from Kentucky and Bourbon County. They want you to think that. They do a good job at it. If you go down to Kentucky, do the Bourbon Trail, they will pound that into your head. However, bourbon is a product of the United States. As long as you're following all the rules, you can make bourbon anywhere in the US. So weirdly, kind of counterintuitively, we do have that in common with bourbon. We're an American whiskey. We use the same style barrel as well. So we get these barrels from a cooperage out in Lebanon, Missouri. It's called Independent Stave Company. They're pretty cool in their own right, IST. They assemble these guys in the traditional manner. They actually plant as many trees as they use, which it's just smart when you're in the barrel making business, but you know, it's good for other reasons too. But you see that nice heavy char on there, guys. That's what we call number 3 char. Accomplishing by charring the inside of the barrel is we're caramelizing all the oils and the sugars in the wood, and that's going to give our whiskey 60 to 70% of its flavor and 100% of its color as well. So remember guys, when it's going in the barrel, it's just white dog cut with water, right? It's clear, it looks like water. This barrel in particular, it's creeping up on 6 years old. My coworker was here the day they filled it up. He told me it only took a few hours before it started to take on that nice reddish hue. And all that color is just tiny little particles of char. When we first started out, we thought it would be super cool, like rugged Colorado whiskey, to send our bottles out with like the big flakes of char in them. Nobody else thought that was cool. They kept sending them back, like, what is wrong with you guys? So we filter our whiskey now. Anyway, so if you want to look at that barrel one more time, guys, what do you notice that's a little strange about it? Aside from the light and the clear heads, of course. It's not full, exactly right, sir. So, guess what, guys? Barrels are expensive. We never reuse our own barrels, so we have to get everything we can out of them. We fill them all the way to the top. However, clearly over time, we are losing a significant portion of that whiskey. Now, there's a couple different sides to this, but the vast majority is being lost to what we in the industry refer to as angel share. You guys might have heard that term before. The term itself was actually coined by European monks in the Middle Ages who would age things in barrels and sometimes be a little perplexed when they'd crack one open after a few years and a fifth of it would be gone. Now, I'm not a monk, but if I were, I'd probably imagine my fellow monks were some honest dudes and not like sneaking a straw in there or something. So they said it was the angels coming down, taking a little swig off the barrel, blessing it, and taking off again. Today, of course, we call this evaporation. So you can smell that in this room, right? That's alcohol vapor. That's why you have to be 21 to be on this tour. Because by being in this room and breathing the air, our blood alcohol content is being slightly elevated. Yeah, it's true. If you were to,
calories, right?
Yeah, right. And if you were to fall asleep in here overnight, by morning you would be above the legal limit. So that's why it's my favorite room. Yeah, so there's another side of this as well, guys, and that's the whiskey that's been lost to the wood of the barrel itself. Now, this also has an industry name. One that you've probably definitely heard at some point. I'm not supposed to say it on tours because a larger distillery trademarked it. But you guys don't work here. Does anyone know what it is? The cut, yeah. So I call it the equally sexy whiskey penetration line. It's very snappy, right, guys? That's what they get you to work with. That's that nice dark line in the center of the stave. That's where the whiskey is seeping into the wood and it's remaining there. You guys can pass that around, it's kind of cool. And that's what makes barrels so valuable when we're done with them. So while we never reuse our barrels, Scottish and Irish distillers do. They can't produce their own barrels they can't produce their own barrels over there anymore. I mean, there just aren't enough trees for one, and also American white oak is kind of the standard. But yeah, so they import from the big guys here in North America that make 10,000 of these a week, or crank out 10,000 a week. It helps with their angel share as well, because that barrel's been saturated one time. And also that's why you have to age Scotch and Irish whiskey for much longer than you do bourbon on average. That barrel's already been used once, it's already had a char stripped off of it. It's gonna have to sit for a little bit longer to get the same amount of flavor. So our barrels, they go all over the place. Breweries, wineries, other distilleries. Some just went to Ireland actually, which is pretty cool. But rack houses, where we store barrels, traditionally, like if you go down to Kentucky, they're basically just giant barns. They don't seal them off, and that's because you want that natural fluctuation of temperature, right? It's gonna open and close the pores of the wood, give you all that good interaction, color, and flavor. However, pretty much everywhere else on earth where they make whiskey, they have this thing that's weird to those of us that are from Colorado. It's called humidity. It doesn't really exist here, so we have to keep our rack house enclosed and climate controlled. Otherwise, our barrels would dry out almost immediately, and we'd be losing a ton to angel share. So this makes a huge difference though. So for example, I took a distillery tour last year in Dublin, and my tour guide told me that in Ireland you lose 2% of every barrel per year to angel share. You'll never exceed 2% in Ireland. Part of that is that pre-saturated barrel, part of that is just a nice damp environment, right? I told him here we lose 8%, and his brain just like exploded on the spot. He actually didn't believe me, as if I have a motive to invent that number or something. But the thing is, if we weren't climate controlling our rack house, we would be losing 15%. We do have a few other types of Stranahans. We have a black label, it's called Diamond Peak. I'm gonna talk about that one a little bit later. We have a sherry finished Stranahan, it's a newer product. So what we did with that, we aged it for 4 years in a standard oak barrel, and then we transferred it to a pre-used Spanish sherry barrel so it could soak up some of that wine that's in the wood. So just as people acquire our old pre-used barrels, we did that with those sherry barrels. So actually, if you look over there, guys, those large dark barrels on their sides, those are our sherry barrels. They're about 50 years old, and they have sherry aging in them for 40 years. Yeah, they're good. I got to drink out of one once. It was a good day at work. That was pretty cool. But yeah, that's what we used to make our sherry, and that's a similar thing that we used to make the Snowflake. So, have you guys heard? You've heard of Snowflake, obviously. Has anyone else ever heard of Snowflake? A couple of you may get find it. Yeah, you can't get it. Yeah, that's right. We talked about it before the tour. So here's
for a friend, Max.
That's why I work here, man. So here's the deal, guys. Snowflake is our big project. It's what we work on all year, every year, because we only release it one day a year, and that's always in December. You can only buy it here at the distillery one day a year in December. But that is not why it's called Snowflake. It's called Snowflake because every batch, every year is completely different. And how we achieve that is through more than just the sherry barrels. We get barrels from all over the world that have all different types of alcohol in them. We finish our whiskey in them, and then Rob will come up with a new Snowflake every year by mixing them together, creating a new ratio. So that's why it's so much. Which one did you try? Did you try Quandary Peak? Do you know? Most recent.
Whatever is being served presently.
I think it's Quandary, which is our batch from this previous year. That was 3 different types of rum barrel: port, Madeira, cognac, and Sangiovese in it. So that's why it's so sweet. Very complex. Nice sweetness to it, nice balance as well. But yeah, it's definitely because of all those factors, it's going to be much sweeter than this guy for sure. But yeah, so very complex whiskey, very interesting thing. We only sell it the 1 day a year.
How many bottles are you allowed?
What's that?
How many bottles are you allowed to purchase?
2 per customer and $100 each. We only sell about 1,200 bottles.
Christmas present for me.
Yeah, you're getting thrown under the bus here. So,
did you need a friend?
So to illustrate it, guys, I had the first guy in line this past year on my tour recently. His name's Mike, super cool guy. He told me he lined up 6 a.m. Wednesday morning, and we released it on Saturday. Yeah, so people in December will sleep on the sidewalk outside our distillery for 3 days to get this whiskey. Yeah, we've been on national news the last couple of years because it gets bigger every year. It's super fun though, you know, there's always like a guy making chili, everybody's hanging out, having a good time. And yeah, 2 per customer, $100 each. Last year we opened the doors at 8 a.m. and we sold out by 10:45, 11, I want to say. So about 1,200 bottles gone like that. Honestly, we would sell out quicker if we had more cash registers. I worked a cash register last year. That was fun. It was intense. It's just, you're just cranking people through. We do it as fast as we can, and it just goes like that. So yeah, you guys cannot buy a bottle, unfortunately, but as a couple of you have discovered, you can buy drams of it in the lounge. It's the only place you can get it. So if you are curious, you want to just try something different, something unique that you can only get here, talk to Steve. He'll take